Welcome to the Macdownunder Podcast for all Australian Apple computer enthusiasts and collectors.
Welcome to episode 33 of the Macdownunder Podcast. I'm Justin, and thanks so much for all the likes and comments on the video so far. Last week's episode on wireless keyboards seemed to have been very popular, so thanks for all of that. So, today's episode is the start of a new series where we're going to look at Apple's external storage devices. And today we'll start with the 5 1/4 inch disk drives. We'll also cover major collecting news, coming events and recent for sale finds. So on to today's episode. As I think a lot of you will know, the Apple Computer 1 didn't come with any external storage. You had to add an interface card that allowed you to use cassette storage. When the Apple II was originally introduced, it too came with built-in cassette storage input-output, and Apple provided all sorts of cassettes like this one, the alignment test tone and the renumber append application, but Apple never provided an external cassette deck of their own. So the first external storage device that Apple produced was the Apple II disk drive. And here's an example of the early models. So it's a 5 1/4 inch disk drive, single-sided, although you could cut a slot in the discs and flip them over so you could use both sides. Originally, under DOS System 3.2, there's the system master there, it provided you with 113.75 kilobytes of disk drive storage. So that's 256 bytes per sector, 13 sectors originally per track, and 35 tracks per side. So that was the original disk drive. Now, it's based on a Shugart SA400 mechanism, except Apple said, we just want the drive. We don't want the interface board, we don't want the sensors, we're going to do all of that ourselves. So it was a modified Shugart SA400 labelled the SA390 specifically for Apple. And Apple provided all of their custom parts. And again, Steve Wozniak, the engineering genius, did all that hard work on behalf of the company, and says it was one of the best projects he ever did. Now, the Shugart drive was eventually replaced with the Alps drive, probably because they were more available and probably a little cheaper. As you can see, it comes with a rainbow ribbon, 20 pins, and a 20-pin IDC connector at the other end. In order to use this disk drive, you needed a disk to interface card like this one. And you can see that it allows you to connect 2 disk drives, but you needed to be particularly careful when inserting the cable, because if you're off by a pin, there was a good chance you could fry the card or the drive, or potentially both. So the Disk 2 card, plenty of them around, and plenty of these original Apple II drives as well. So if we fast forward to 1980, there was some minor changes, again, probably associated with the Alps drive being used as the mechanism, but the main difference now being the ubiquitous grey cable. Labelling and so forth on the back is the same, and underneath is the same. But also in 1980, we got System 3.3, and there's the system disk for that one. And what came with System Disk 3.3 was a change to 2 of the PROMs, P5 and P6, on the Disk 2 interface. So the upgrade wasn't just the software, it was 2 ROMs as well, and that allowed you to address 16 sectors on the disk. Now that meant that you could get 140 kilobytes on a DOS 3.3 disk, but unfortunately you could no longer read the DOS 3.2 disks. So 3.3 was 256 bytes per sector still, but now 16 sectors per track, again still 35 tracks per side. So still beige in colour, again the platinum cable out the back. Now later on in order to match the Apple IIe, there was a third revision of the drive. Again, looks very similar at the front. Still got the grey cable, a bit longer in this case. But you'll notice on the back that the labelling has changed, and it's very reminiscent of the Apple IIe labelling. So that clearly came out in the mid-80s. Now they were all beige. However, there were some alternative colours as well. And I guess the most common is the Bell & Howell version. Again, manufactured by Apple on behalf of Bell & Howell as one of the licensed clone sellers. And you'll notice it's the same mechanism, it's the same box, but in black, so the Darth Vader version. And again, labelled as a Bell & Howell disk drive. But the labelling on the back and on the bottom is much the same, although there's now a Bell & Howell sticker as well. And again, the ubiquitous grey cable. Now, it wasn't the only alternative drive. Now, unfortunately, the others are pretty rare and I haven't been able to get one in my hands. But there was also the Clearlight Superstar disk drive, which was grey in colour, but still manufactured by Apple and still had the Apple logo, but was rebranded for the Clearlight system. And there was also the ITT 2020 over in Europe, and they had their own disk drives, which were 13 sectors only. They never got the upgrade in the ITT 2020, and it did seem to have eventually a slightly different mechanism. So originally manufactured by Apple, but later on manufactured by ITT themselves with a slightly different mechanism. So that's the Apple Disk 2 for the Apple II. Now, if we fast forward to 1980, again that year, the Apple III had been released and they needed a disk drive. So whilst this looks very much like a disk 2 for the Apple II, it's actually a disk 2 for the Apple III. And you can see the labelling on the sticker for the drive number, drive 3 in this case. Again, the grey cable, but on the back, now what we find is that we've got a daisy chain port. And so the disk 2 for the Apple III was essentially the same mechanism, but electrically it was different. It's now got a 26-pin cable and a 26-pin IDC, which plugs straight into the back of the Apple III. The Apple III Plus actually had a slightly different cable, and so input, and so you needed an adapter whenever you're using these with the Apple III. So you could daisy chain up to 3 drives with your Apple III, meaning with the internal drive on the Apple III, you could have 4 drives in total. Now this was a stopgap because in fact Apple had been developing something else that we'll talk about later on to use in all of its products. So that's why they used the Disk 2 initially in 1980, because they needed something, and of course the Disk 2s were around. But in 1981, Apple released the Apple Disk 3, and here's an example of the Disk 3. Now, it's now in a beige plastic case, looking very much like the Apple III plastics on the front, but also has this upturned lip, which was consistent with the profile of the Apple III, the Monitor 3, and eventually the external hard drive, the profile itself. So again, has the daisy chain and the 26-pin IDC on the 26-pin cable. But otherwise, internally, the hardware is the same as a Disk 2. Now in 1984, Apple released the Duo disk drive, and here's an example. So it contained 2 5¼ disk drives, and these were 2/3 height, which made them a bit more compact. Now this particular unit, because it's got 2 disk drives in it, can't be daisy chained. It came with its own new controller card, labelled as an I/O or input-output controller, with a 19-pin connector for the Apple II. But the interesting thing is that on the back of the drive, it's actually got a 25-pin connector, which is actually designed to plug into the back of the Apple III that had the same 25-pin connector. However, for the Apple II, you needed a particular drive cable to go from 25 pins on this to 19 pins on your input-output interface card. So each unit requires its own disk controller, and of course the disk controller can only control 2 drives. So if you wanted more than 2 drives in your Apple IIe, then you needed multiple drive cards as well as multiple duo discs. And as you can see in the beige colour, it was designed to sit on top of your Apple IIe and underneath your Monitor 2e. So starting to have very consistent looking hardware. In 1984, Apple released the Apple IIc, and alongside the Apple IIc, they released the Disk IIc. Again, in the Snow White design language with the slots and so forth, and coloured in the Apple fog to match the Apple IIc. It was a half-height drive. As you can see, it's quite thin. And this time we had a DB19 connector, which allowed you to connect it straight into the back of your Apple IIc. Now the Apple IIc originally wasn't designed for daisy chaining, so there's no daisy chain connection on this one. So single Apple IIc drive into your Apple IIc. It was possible to use the Apple IIc drive with your Apple IIe or other Apple II Disk II products, but it had to be the last disk drive in the chain because of course it has no daisy chain available. Now in 1985, Apple released a new external disk drive for the Apple II, and in this case it was the Unidisc. And so you can see the plastics have now changed, largely to match the Apple IIe at the time. This is in fact the beige version because at that stage the Apple IIe series was still in beige. But what we now have is the 19-pin connector that we saw earlier, and now we have the daisy chain as well, so that you could daisy chain your 5 1/4 inch disk drives. Now with this, you still needed to connect it to your I/O controller card, the same card as used for the Duo disc. So the 19-pin connector inside your Apple IIe. Of course, you could use it on an Apple IIc, but you just couldn't use the daisy chain function. Now, this particular one being beige, an easy way to tell is that firstly it says Unidisc on the bottom, and it's got the black feet. So fairly confident that this is the Unidisc in beige, even though it has yellowed quite a bit. In 1986, Apple changed that drive with the release of the Apple IIgs, and we now have the Platinum version. Now again, difficult to tell that it's Platinum because it's yellowed as well, but the telltale signs here are we've got the white feet, and of course the label says that it's an Apple 5.25 inch drive rather than a uni drive. So the main difference being the casing. We've still got the 19-pin connector, we've still got the daisy chain. In fact, these two drives, the Uni Drive 5.25 and the Apple 5.25 drive, can effectively be used interchangeably. One thing that did happen at the same time though is that there was a slight modification to the interface card. So now we've got the Apple 5.25 drive controller card. It is in fact electrically identical to the I/O card used for the Unidrive and Unidisc and Duo disc, but relabeled to match the Apple 5.25 drive. Now, a couple of odd things. Here, this enormous thing is a stack of FileWare drives. So these are the Twiggy drives that were out of they're out of this Lisa 1. But these drives were also intended to be used as a unifile or a duofile drive. They never went to market. However, there are some prototypes available, and one of them happens to be in New South Wales. Now, these particular drives allowed for 871 kilobytes of data, uniquely built by Apple with a unique disk. And as you can see, there are two head reading areas. So these were double-sided, double-headed, high-density disks. But in 1982, when the Lisa came out, 1983 when the Lisa came out, 1982 the demos, 871 kilobyte fileware disks, and you can see that Apple provided the diskware as well. Again, the individual drives to put on your Apple III or your Apple II never got launched into production. However, some bits and pieces exist. As I mentioned, there's a prototype in New South Wales, and in fact what I've got here is the prototype interface card. So this is labelled as the Apple III Uni/Duo Intelligent Controller, and it's got an interface there to connect to your unifile or your duo file. So hopefully one day I'll get to meet one of those, and we can test out the hardware. And software is available too from the user group over in the United States. So quite a unique card. I think I've spoken about it on the channel in the past. Another odd drive that Apple produced that's 5.25 inches is this. So this is the Apple PC 5.25 inch disk drive, specifically made to better compete with the IBM business machines when they came out. It was released alongside the Macintosh SE and the Macintosh 2, and it required a custom disk drive interface card. And here's the interface card. It's an enormous U-bus card. This is the one for the Macintosh 2. There was a smaller customised version for the Mac SE. But this allowed you to connect the rather large connector to your Macintosh and then access the 360 kilobyte MS-DOS formatted disks. The other thing that you needed was the software. And as a lot of people will be aware, the Apple File Exchange utility was available to read PC disks off a 3.5 inch disk drive, but it also worked with this 5.25 inch disk drive to read MS-DOS formatted 360K floppy disks. There are also software translators made available that could convert between WordStar and MacWrite and other things like that. So, 5.25 inch disk drives. Have you got any in your collection? Are you still using them? Which one is your favourite? Do you have one of the rare unifile or duofile Twiggy disks? Gee, I'd love to know. So let me know down in the comments what your favourite 5.25 inch disk drive is. I'd love to hear from you. So in the news today, we're in Macdownunder, of course, and last week we spoke about the Global Talk Network that's very active just at the moment, but I thought today I'd put a link in for the Macdownunder 2026 projects. I think there's 41 posts so far and lots of projects listed, hardware projects, software projects, graphics projects. There's heaps going on in the community, so take a look at the link which goes back into the Tinker Different forums to see what everyone's doing for Macdownunder. Good luck with all your projects. Okay, on to coming events. And Retro Gaming Bendigo have a few changes this month for Macdownunder, maybe not for Macdownunder because they're not a Macintosh group. However, they have a second meeting this month on Sunday the 29th of March, remembering that they have moved as well to the Huntley Memorial Hall at 647 Midland Highway, Huntley, near Bendigo. Check the link down in the description for all the details. WASFest 43 has been announced. So I'll put the link that's got the dates in the description underneath the video. But WASFest 43 is on the 28th of March to celebrate Apple's 50th anniversary. So links down in the description. Now remember, this is in a private home, so reach out to the organisers to find out the details. Technology markets have their next swap meet on Sunday the 22nd of March at the Springish Leisure Centre in Keysborough. This isn't necessarily a retro display, but nevertheless there'll be parts there, so if you need them, head on down. The Train and Hobby Show is coming up this weekend, Saturday the 14th and Sunday the 15th of March at the Sandown Racecourse here in Victoria. Now, as you know, the Mac Museum and Declan, friend of the show, will both be demonstrating and putting on displays of Macintosh and Apple equipment. I've had a sneak preview from their discussions. It sounds really exciting. So try to get down there next weekend, the 14th, 15th of March at the Sandown Racecourse. I'll certainly try to get there for part of both days. The Adelaide Retro Computing Group have their next regular meeting this Friday, the 13th of March from 5:30 until 10:30 p.m. in the usual Unley Community Centre in Unley. Check the description for more information. And finally, the Mac Museum does not have an open day this weekend. However, if you want to check out the Mac Museum's equipment alongside some others, again, go down to the Train and Hobby Show. Matt will be there, Declan will be there, there'll be a heap of people there with retro computing, other electronics, all sorts of hobbies, including trains, remote controlled cars and boats and all sorts of things. So a great day out, so don't forget to get down there. So no Mac Museum opening day this Saturday, go to the Train and Hobby Show instead. But after that, the Mac Museum will be open again weekly, with the first Saturday of the month being the Enthusiast Day. In fact, I went down to the Enthusiast Day last weekend. It was great to catch up with the other regulars and have a look at the inside of a profile hard drive. We had a look at some special interfaces for external graphics on the PowerBook 1400s, all sorts of interesting things going on. And also, as you might have seen, Matt's got his networked games there, 3 iMacs playing marathon together. What a fun thing that was to see. So get down to the Mac Museum after this weekend, the Train and Hobby Show. So for this week's for sale section, all these things are Apple 5.25" disc related, of course. What else would they be? So first up, we have a vintage Apple II Disc 2 floppy drive from New South Wales for $95. We have a similar Disc 2 floppy disk drive. This one's in Melbourne for $100. I found a Duo drive online. Now the case is damaged, but it's the only one I could find around Australia that's for sale. Because it's damaged, it's currently $50 in Armidale, New South Wales. In Wollongong, New South Wales, there's an external floppy drive. This is the Platinum 5.25" drive for $75 in New South Wales. Now, if you're looking for one of those Apple II Disc 2 interface cards, this one's available in Victoria for $90. And there's a second Disc 2 interface card also available in Victoria for $90. So the Apple 5.25" drives and their accessories are becoming a bit rare. So keep your eye out if you're looking for one. There are bargains around, but you'll need to be patient. Well, that brings us to the end of episode 33 and discussion about Apple's 5.25" disc drives. Please let me know what you thought down in the comments. At this stage, I'm planning to cover the 3.5" disc drives in the next episode. Let me know what you think about that too. So let me know. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. And don't forget, this weekend, the Mac Museum's closed. Go to the Train and Hobby Show for your Macintosh or Apple fix, but then after that, the museum will be open again weekly. So, thanks again for joining me today. Until I see you next time, take care. Thank you for joining the Macdownunder Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you again soon.